Okay. Good night. I don't know what. Oh my god, it's so well secured. Oh my god. I can't believe you've done this. Hello, artists, and art appreciators, and welcome to a very exciting video. As you heard in the intro, I was really not expecting everything in this box. To make a long story short, a fellow doll artist on Tumblr, Queen of Squids, printed one of my 3D models and wanted to print it in yellow, but the default yellow resin was very orange colored. She very kindly offered to send me the resulting print, which was particularly kind and helpful because it was like a semi-prototype type of thing, and I would be able to make some alterations based on what I saw, and then hopefully her next print would be like slightly better than it would be otherwise. But that print is not what is in this video. She also printed, just for me, the original Takara My Little Pony model that I made a video on last year and that I had been working on for like a year before that, which I've never gotten printed before, and sent both that and also a second smaller prototype of the other model. So she sent me 3 3D resin prints, which is crazy. I've never had any resin prints before, and they're like, it's so nice of her. So again, Queen of Squids has brought you this video and also 2 videos in the future. Since the body is orange, there is only one real choice for this pony, Applejack. I mean, don't get me wrong, I could have done a different character or like made my own character or painted it, but I love Applejack. I already had yellow hair, so it was an easy choice. Also, Applejack is a main character in both Generation 1 and Generation 4, and since the Takara ponies were designed in the 1980s during Generation 1, it seemed right to make Applejack. She's a long-lasting character. Fans of the original and newer generations both recognize her. I guess I consider this sort of a parallel universe extra version of Applejack. You know, the Takara version of Applejack, which is an excuse for me to say she's going to be wearing a frilly outfit that doesn't really match Generation 4 Applejack's aesthetics. I just didn't really feel making overalls or jean skirts or something. I don't know. I feel like that's what people always dress Applejack from Generation 4 in, because she's a cowgirl. I do feel a bit bad about having taken so long working on these projects, because I got these last year, like in the fall, but I wanted to do them to the best of my abilities, and I haven't worked with resin prints before, only the PLA prints, and only 2 of them. So I started with the mini Takara because it has the least moving pieces, and after all, I was working on this for like over a year and I never got it printed. I would have eventually tried to get it printed at the library, but I ended up going with the Sea Pony because I didn't want 2 videos basically in a row with the same model. And also the library, you know, has a lot of other people who want things printed, so I try not to get things printed that often because my prints have a lot of working pieces and they could mess up and it would take a lot of time. Anyways, I love the library and I try to use the library. You should use your local library if you can, but I also try to be respectful of them being busy. Anyways, I didn't do much prep work on the Takara pony. I didn't even sand it that much because I don't have a sanding box right now, which is another thing that's kind of delaying it. But resin prints are like so smooth, you basically cannot see any lines except a little bit at the top, and then there are some bumps where the supports were, but I don't mind them. They're like very unobtrusive. I did do some sanding on the nose because it was a little pixelated, which means you could see like the square artifacts from when it was 3D modeled. I didn't make the resolution high enough. I guess I just had trouble judging at first with a lot of my 3D prints how high their resolution needs to be, because a 3D model is kind of like made up of hundreds of tiny squares, and there needs to be a lot of squares per inch to make something curve smoothly. It reminds me of when I visited the Frank Lloyd Wright S.C. Johnson building, which has these giant curved brick walls which use 200 different molds of brick to achieve a perfectly smooth curve. Except in my case, I have to do the same curve using hundreds of extremely tiny square bricks, and if you shrink that down to the size of an ant, you can see that the bricks are not curved at all. It's just entirely an illusion made up of tiny squares and triangles in a specific way. So it's not actually like the Frank Lloyd Wright building, but you can see how if I could make 200 molds of tiny square brick, then that would be a lot easier than making tiny squares, but I can't because that's not how 3D modeling works. Anyways, I got distracted. Since the pony was more of like a light orange, sort of a pastel, I decided to bring in some red orange for the cheeks and various details. I don't often mention my art supplies, but I'll do so here. I used Conte a Paris. That probably is supposed to be said in a lot of accents. I see multiple accents in that. Conte a Paris. Chalk pastel crayons for shading. I've used them for a few other projects, and they seem reliable. They're kind of like a low, mid-tier option price-wise, but I got these as a gift from my mom some years ago, and I don't know, they work really well. I can't use chalk pastel like crayons on paper. It like makes my skin crawl, so I really only use them for my art projects like this. I didn't show this, but I used multiple layers of spray-on matte varnish. It's Liquitex matte varnish, which I use for all my projects that I want to like be matte and well sealed. I don't film it because I can't be bothered to move my camera to my porch when I spray outdoors. I feel like Mr. Super Clear has such a tight grip on the doll community, and it's just like such a nuisance to try and get it, to order it, and it's like a little more expensive too, and I could just go to my local store and get the Liquitex matte varnish and I have never had an issue. Obviously, you should always test that like a new sealant will work with other materials, but it seems, I don't know, it's weird to me that MSC is touted as so different than standard varnishes. Maybe someday I'll use MSC and it will like blow my mind, but I don't know, today is not that day. I used that to seal the pastel and it worked really well. At this point I've poured boiling water over her head, not like in the video, but at this point in real life. And the sealant worked really well, so that's great. The pencils are just Prismacolor colored pencils, nothing fancy. I have like 2 sets of the exact same pencil and they're really reliable and they worked great on this. And I used like progressively darker colors. So I used orange and you could barely see it. And then I used red and you could see it a little better. And then I added the acrylic paint afterwards. And I use like a, Liquitex acrylic paint as well. By the way, I only put the eye in there as sort of an example to show myself what it would look like in the end. It is not attached at this point, although the eyes do kind of stay in the socket really well without like anything holding them in place. I did eventually put some sticky tack and I might glue them in place, but right now they just have sticky tack and they're holding in place just fine. My version of the Takara pony is strung a little bit differently than what I had said in the past. What traditional ball jointed dolls are strung with is like a little hook that goes over the bar in their arms and legs, and then they use an elastic running through the body. So I have the elastic, but I didn't end up using hooks, and I actually used 2 different elastics, kind of in different ways. So instead of hooks, I learned from Queen of Squids that you can use just a loop of thread, and that seems to work much better for the smaller dolls, or like dolls with much smaller bars sort of across them. So I used a little thread around both of the leg bars, and then I attached a loop through that and pulled it up through the head, and it has some beads inside the head to really just like stabilize it, and so I could leave extra elastic in the head just in case. And then the arms are just a single loop of elastic that goes through both arms, and it seems to work out pretty well. I'd say the only issue with this design is I realized that she can't really sit. She kind of leans back and like falls backwards if I have her sit down. So I can sort of have her seated if I position her so that she is like leaning very firmly against something, but she's too top heavy, especially because she's made of resin. She is quite dense. Since the only prints I've had before are PLA prints, they are like shockingly light. But this little doll is quite dense. I wonder if I have a scale around. I actually have a scale over here. Okay, I just weighed her. She is roughly 180 or so grams, it appears. So that's like surprisingly weighty for such a small object, and you can definitely feel it when you pick her up. It does make her feel very like, I guess like expensive and quite sturdy. And like I said, the matte sealant seems to have sealed everything in really well, so she does seem very sturdy compared to like dolls that I've handmade before. So that's pretty wild. By the way, the original Takara's, they didn't have the little eyelashes, but the baby versions did. So I based the eyelashes off of the baby version of the Takara doll, and then the eyebrows off the adult version. Obviously, the pastel shading is just for the drama. Oh, and I wanted to mention with the pastels, I kind of got a lot of the pastels all over her body on accident, because I was kind of like resting her in the chalk pastel while she was sitting on the desk, and then I sprayed her down, and then I realized that there were spots that I didn't expect on her. So I ended up doing a lot more pastels on the legs and the body and the little booty, way more than I had expected that I would. But I think it turned out really nice in the end, because it is such like a simple figure with such simple details on the face and eyes. And I used a Posca marker to do the freckles, like the original Applejack and like the Generation 4 Applejack. I struggled with the clothes quite a bit, particularly because I couldn't find my sewing machine. I finally talked to my mom about it offhand, forgetting that it's literally used to be her sewing machine, and she immediately sent me links to figure out my problem. But by then, I had already hand sewn everything out of desperation. So I haven't really figured out how to film myself putting together clothes. I tried some fancy transitions, but the truth is I'm just so inexperienced at sewing, and making patterns is like very hard because all my dolls are shaped differently. And I usually make multiple pieces that fail, and I never know which piece will turn out good enough, so I don't like filming it. I also hand sew in my lap, which makes filming difficult. So I just hope that as I get better at sewing and do more outfits, I'll have the confidence to show you more of the process. But this is what we got. This is what I got right now. I created her a nice frilly skirt, a nice frilly blouse, which I had multiple attempts doing, and I used way more ribbon in the skirt than I thought. I will say the shape of the skirt was a little difficult to keep flat. I had to iron it flat, and it still didn't work out that well, so I kind of cheesed it and sewed different pieces together to make it a more like cup shape. It can also be hard to sew small fabrics because they don't like fall in the same way that like a full-size dress would. They're just not heavy enough to kind of go down. And then lastly, I did make a hat for her like Generation 4 Applejack, and I made that out of felt, and I first made like a nice little prototype out of paper. Forgot to film a lot of the process. You can see me start to make it here. I'm still trying to figure out how people do hair. I followed a tutorial for this where it was about like gluing the hair, and it got all over the place. I tried to follow the tutorial as best as possible, but like it was falling out of the glue. It was all sticking out. I don't know. I made wefts for the hair like the tutorial said, but it's just gluing them on and figuring out how to make them look good was much harder than I expected. And also this hair is just kind of difficult for me to deal with, even though it's like, I think, pretty good quality hair. But you'll see that at the reveal for the video. Before then, I want to show you something else. I began working on the Takara Pony project over a year ago, and nearly a year and a half at this point. I've had a lot of nice people test the pony and see whether it could be printed and give feedback, but having my own copy helped me reconsider some of my design choices, so I decided to make an updated 2025 version. This is called version 2025. Because otherwise it would be like version 4 or 5. Newest version uses pretty much all the same pieces of the original, but makes some like behind the scenes adjustments to how everything fits together, so it's easier for me to edit. The only real visual changes I made were adjusting the length of the torso to make it a little longer, and the legs, and I flattened the feet too. So the feet are much longer and flattened, so hopefully that'll help it pose. I have made a couple quality of life changes to the sculpt based on feedback, including my own thoughts. I standardized the size of the pegs inside the legs and the arm so that they are the same size. I included versions of the head with the eye built in for people who don't want to print the eyepieces separately. I improved the resolution so there won't be pixelation like mine has up on her forehead for all of the pieces. And I also included extra versions of the head and body that have built-in hair and tail holes. The hair will still have to be glued in. It can't be rooted as easily as like a vinyl doll. But some people were like drilling through the plastic or melting through it, and hopefully having holes will be a lot safer and cleaner for people who want to do like pseudo-rooted hair. Like the previous version of the Takara Mini BJD, this one will be free. You can find it on Cults 3D. In addition, I've created three, but I'll get into that, new dolls whose pieces will be available to purchase on Cults 3D. They're not entirely new dolls, but they're like new pieces, and they include this giraffe, which has the same body and arms as the normal Takara, but has a unique head, nose, hooves, and a neck piece in between the head and the body, which I guess you can also make like an okapi if you remove the neck piece. The second is this creature, which is officially a South American bush dog, or at least my best approximation of one in this style. A commenter on one of my videos suggested I do an anthro of a South American bush dog, and although I don't have time to do a complete new project like that, as someone who's always loved the Amazon rainforest, I figured I would put them in here to tell you about them. They're a species of small, social, bear or corgi-shaped small dog, closely related to the Maine wolf. They eat mostly rodents and hunt in packs to take down larger prey like the capybara, which is roughly 5 times its weight by my estimate. It is considered near threatened by habitat destruction throughout its range. The final additional animal is this alligator. Although I don't have a specific species, maybe it should be the Chinese alligator to keep the theme of conservation relevant species. However, I might not have the alligator up by the time this video goes up because it's remaking all of the pieces instead of just some of them, and I want the mouth opening mechanism to maybe be tested. But for sure, I'm going to do this alligator at some point. Anyways, on to the reveal. I am extremely happy with how Takara Applejack turned out. I think she looks so cute. I mean, I feel like maybe every video I say, like, this is the best thing I've ever made, but, like, I think she is. She's, like, the best thing. She's so cute. It's like, she's not that detailed, but all of her details were really carefully thought out. I'm so proud of her tiny eyelashes and eyebrows. That seems like the smallest thing in the world. But, like, I took so long to make them look as if they were, like, near factory perfect and symmetrical and everything. Obviously, I'm happy to finally have my own, like, Takara pony, and it's so cool that I saw these, you know, nearly a year and a half ago, and now I can have one, even though the real ones are, like, $900, and I could never afford them. But now I have my own, and she's Applejack from My Little Pony, which is super cool. And I do really like her outfit, even though I struggled to make it. So I hope you liked this video, and thank you for following this little journey. Stay tuned for more. We have 2 more resin prints that are already in progress, and lots of other projects. I have a Ko-fi where you can get like exclusive 3D models and early access to stuff. And finally, thank you to my Ko-fi supporters, Retro Geek Crafts, Luca, Zero, Gabby Rose, and Casino. Thank you to everyone also who's just viewing and liking. I appreciate the support and the kind messages, and I hope to see you all again next time. Goodbye!